There is a very specific kind of fear that only finds you at 1 in the morning. You have been driving for hours. Your back aches. Your eyes are doing things on their own. The road ahead is dark and empty, and the GPS is showing you an exit you have never heard of, with a name you will forget by morning. And the only thing waiting at that exit is a motel. A sign with a few letters burned out, a parking lot with almost no cars, a front office with thick glass, and a man behind it who does not look up when you walk in. You tell yourself it will be fine. You just need a few hours. Nobody is going to bother you. That is what all of them said. Tonight, I am sharing 4 real encounters, 4 different people, 4 different roads, 4 different states, 4 different rooms. Each one of them checked in thinking the same thing you would think, that it was just a place to sleep, that they would be gone before sunrise and forget the whole thing by lunch. But some nights, the motel does not forget about you. These are not ghost stories. There are no monsters, no jump scares, nothing supernatural. What I am about to tell you is far more unsettling than that, because every single person in these stories was dealing with something completely real. Stay with me all the way to the end. The last story in particular has an ending I still turn over in my head. I do not have a clean explanation for it. I'm not sure one exists. Let us get into it.
Welcome back. If you have been here before, you know exactly what kind of channel this is and what we do here. And if this is your first time finding this video, I am genuinely glad the algorithm sent you here tonight. This channel exists for one reason: real stories, told exactly the way they happened. No dramatization, no sound effects, no actors. Just the truth of what people experienced, delivered as plainly and honestly as possible. Because real life does not need anything added to it to be terrifying. The 4 stories you are about to hear were shared by real people. I have expanded them, shaped them for the way stories are meant to be told, and given them the space they deserve. Because some experiences are so strange, so disturbing, or so close to going wrong in a way that does not bear thinking about, that they deserve more than a single paragraph on a forum somewhere. They deserve to be heard. So get comfortable. Turn the lights down if you want. We are going to be here for a while. And if at any point during one of these stories you feel like you need to check the lock on your front door, go ahead. I will still be here when you get back. I have made the drive from New York down to Tennessee more times than I can count. It is a long trip, somewhere around 13 hours, depending on traffic and how many stops you make, and I have always done it alone. That is not stubbornness or anything like that. I genuinely like driving by myself. I like the time to think. I like being able to listen to podcasts or music without someone else changing what is playing. I like the particular kind of quiet that you only get when you are the only person in a car on a dark highway at midnight and the rest of the world has gone to sleep. So when I left that morning, I had every intention of doing the whole thing in one shot. I had a full tank of gas, a large coffee, and a playlist that would last until I crossed the Tennessee state line. I was not planning to stop except for gas and maybe food. That plan lasted until somewhere in Virginia. I do not remember exactly where I was, somewhere south of Roanoke, I think, but I honestly could not tell you the highway number or the town name. What I remember is the feeling, that specific dangerous feeling when your eyes start doing something other than looking at the road, not exactly closing, but drifting, going slightly out of focus in a way that your brain tries to correct before you consciously notice it. It is the kind of tired that gets people killed, and I recognized it immediately. I pulled off at the next exit, one of those blue sign exits, the ones that list exactly 3 or 4 businesses and nothing else, a gas station, a fast food place, and 2 motels I had never heard of. I picked the cheaper one without much deliberation. I was not looking for a resort. I was looking for a horizontal surface and 4 walls, and this place had both. I should have kept driving.
The motel looked exactly like every cheap motel that has ever appeared in every horror movie you have seen. I say that not to be dramatic, but because it is simply true. It was one of those 2-story buildings where all the room doors face the parking lot directly. No interior corridor, no lobby you walk through to get to your room, just an outdoor walkway along both floors, and a parking lot with half the lights burned out. There were maybe 3 cars in the lot. It was past 1 in the morning on a weeknight, so that was not shocking, but it made the place feel emptied out in a way that was not entirely comfortable. The front office had thick glass, the kind you see at a late-night gas station in a neighborhood where the workers have learned not to trust everyone who walks in. The man behind the glass was in his 50s, maybe. He looked tired and completely indifferent to my existence, which is honestly exactly what you want from a motel clerk at 1 in the morning. I paid for the room. He slid the keycard under the glass without making eye contact. I asked, mostly just to make conversation, whether they had many vacancies. He said most of the rooms upstairs were empty. I actually felt relieved hearing that. I thought, good, no noise, no one walking around above my head at 2 in the morning, just me and a quiet building and a few hours of sleep before I finished the drive. I think about that moment a lot now, how relieved I was, how completely wrong I was about what the night was going to look like. My room was upstairs, at the far end of the building, room 214 if I am remembering correctly. The carpet was that aggressive pattern they put in old motels, the kind designed to hide stains. The air conditioning unit made a rattling sound like something was loose inside it, so I left it off and just dealt with the humidity. There was a smell that was not bad exactly, just very old, the way buildings smell when they have been absorbing people and weather for decades. I genuinely considered sleeping in my car instead. I stood in the middle of the room for probably 2 full minutes just looking around and weighing my options. But I was already there. I had already paid. And I was exhausted in a way that made the bed look like the single greatest object I had ever seen in my life. I locked the door, put the security latch on, pulled the blinds all the way shut, took a shower, and got into bed. I put the television on low, mostly just for background noise, and stared at the ceiling. 20 minutes passed, maybe 25. I was right on the edge of sleep. That is when the arguing started next door.
It came through the wall on my left side, muffled, the way sound always is through cheap motel drywall, but clear enough to identify as voices. 2 of them. One deeper and forceful, the kind of voice that goes up in volume when it is angry, and one softer and higher, with that particular nervous quality that you hear when someone is trying to hold their ground in a fight they are not confident about winning. My first instinct was just irritation. Of course, the one night I needed sleep more than anything, I ended up next to a couple who decided tonight was the night for a blowout fight. I turned the television up slightly and tried to ignore it. But the longer I lay there listening, the more something began to bother me. Not the argument itself, something about the structure of it. In a real argument between 2 people, there is overlap. Voices cut each other off. One person starts talking before the other has finished. Emotions do not wait their turn. But what I was hearing through that wall was perfectly sequential. Voice 1 would go, then silence, then voice 2, then silence, then voice 1 again. Back and forth with a precision that felt almost mechanical, like a conversation that had been choreographed. I turned the television off entirely, I sat up in bed and listened. And then I understood. It was one person. The same man doing both voices. Once I heard it that way, I could not unhear it. The deeper voice was natural. Relaxed even. The voice someone uses when they are not performing. And the softer voice was that same voice, pitched up deliberately, trying to approximate something else, something feminine. Not well, but well enough to be clearly intentional. This was not someone on the phone. There was no television show playing through the wall that happened to sound like two people. This was a grown man, alone in a motel room, in the middle of the night, having a full conversation with himself using two different voices. I want to be careful about how I describe what happened in my body when I realized that, because I think it matters. It was not fear exactly. Not yet. It was more like the sensation of a floor giving way underneath an assumption. Everything I had understood about the situation, the annoying couple, the minor inconvenience, the thing I would laugh about later, all of it collapsed into something I could not explain and did not like. The performance continued for another few minutes, and then it stopped completely. Silence. I stared at the ceiling and tried to convince myself it was over.
3 knocks on the wall directly beside my bed. Not frantic, not random. Slow and deliberate. The way you would knock on someone's front door if you were standing on their porch and expected them to answer. I did not move. I did not breathe. And then, muffled through the drywall, aimed directly at me, a voice said, "I hear you in there." I held completely still. A pause. Then the same 3 knocks. Then the same words again, in the same tone, which was almost playful, like he found something funny about this, like he was enjoying the acknowledgement that I was awake and listening, and now fully aware of him. I reached for the remote and turned the television volume all the way up. 30 seconds of nothing, maybe 40. Then I heard his door open. The sound of a motel room door opening is distinctive. There is the click of the latch, and then the specific way the frame releases, and you can feel the vibration of it through the floor if you are paying attention. I was paying very close attention. Footsteps on the balcony walkway outside, slow, coming toward my end of the building. My blinds were fully closed except for one thin gap along the left edge, where the fabric did not quite reach the wall. I stood on the opposite side of the room staring at that gap, having a very sincere internal argument about whether I wanted to know what was on the other side of it. I decided I did. I crossed the room slowly, moving close to the wall, and reached out and pulled the edge of the blind back by maybe half an inch. The man was standing directly outside my window with his face close to the glass, trying to look in through the exact same gap I was looking out of. We made eye contact for a fraction of a second. I jumped backward. And then he started. The voices began immediately outside my door now. He cycled through them rapidly, high-pitched and childlike, deep and threatening, an exaggerated southern drawl that would have been almost comical in any context that was not this one. He was performing for me now, openly, and he knew I was listening, and he did not care. The knocking on my door began, not violent, not trying to break through anything, but hard enough that the door shuddered in its frame each time, and hard enough that I have no doubt anyone else on that floor could hear it. I called the front desk. The clerk answered, sounding irritated. I started explaining, and then I did not need to keep explaining, because the banging was loud enough to come through the phone on its own. His tone shifted entirely. He said he would be up immediately. The knocking continued, the voices continued, and then, with no warning, both stopped at once. I looked through the peephole just in time to see a figure moving quickly back toward the room next door. The clerk appeared a minute later carrying a flashlight, his other hand hovering near his hip. He knocked on the door next door. No answer. He stood there for a while before coming over to me. I gave him the full version of what had happened. He listened,
And then he paused before saying the man had been staying there for a while. I asked to switch rooms. He moved me to the ground floor, close to the front office in my car. I grabbed my things and followed him down.
The new room was almost identical to the first one. Same carpet, same smell, same rattling AC that I left off. But I was near the stairs, near my car, near the front office. I felt like I could breathe again. I locked both locks and sat on the edge of the bed for a while, just letting my heart slow down. Then I turned the television on quietly and lay back. Exhaustion started pulling me under almost immediately. I thought the worst of it was over. I was wrong about that. I do not know how much time passed before something woke me. It was still dark. The television was still on low. I lay there for a moment trying to identify what had pulled me out of sleep. Then I saw it. Movement past the window. A shadow sliding past the thin crack in the blinds. Then again. Then again. I moved slowly to the window and looked through the gap without pulling the blind back at all, just angling my eye close enough to see through the existing crack. It was him, the same man, walking back and forth past my room on the ground floor, over and over, glancing toward my window every single time he passed. He was not making noise this time. No voices, no knocking, no performance. He was just walking, slowly, deliberately, doing nothing except moving past my window and looking. I watched him do it 4 times, 5 times, each pass exactly the same pace, the same glance, the same turn at the end before coming back. Eventually, he disappeared around the back of the building. I did not sleep after that. I sat in the room with all the lights on, back against the headboard, watching the shadows under the door until the sky outside started lightening. The second there was enough daylight to feel safe, I packed my bag, walked to my car, and drove away without going back to the front desk or returning the keycard. I stopped at a gas station a few miles down the road. I picked up a coffee and sat in the parking lot for a few minutes before I could get back on the highway. My hands were shaking when I held the cup.
This was spring break of my freshman year at Texas State University. I was from Central Texas, and my family had driven up to get me from my dorm so we could take a road trip together. It was me, my stepmom, my grandma, and my 3 sisters. My dad did not come. It was just us girls, which felt like part of the fun of it at the time. We had started in Oklahoma, which my stepmom had wanted to visit for a while. She has some Native American ancestry and has always been interested in the history there. We spent a few days at different historical sites before deciding we were ready to move on. Someone suggested Branson, Missouri, and so we went there next. It was good. We had a nice time. By the end of the week, spring break was almost over, and we needed to start heading back toward my school. The drive was long enough that we could not do it in a single stretch. Not comfortably, not with 6 people and luggage and my grandma who needed regular stops. So around 8 in the evening, we decided to find a motel off the highway and get a few hours of sleep before finishing the drive the next morning. We found one. It was a standard mid-range highway motel, the kind that exists at almost every major exit in this part of the country. Perfectly ordinary looking. Nothing about it from the outside would have told you anything was wrong. We checked in, got our room keys, and decided to go grab pizza before settling in for the night.
Before we left to get food, we stopped by our rooms briefly to drop bags and let my grandma change out of her travel clothes. She called us on the phone to ask what room number we were meeting her at. We were standing in the lobby when she called. My sister answered and said the room number out loud. It was at that exact moment that I noticed him for the first time. A man standing at the entrance of the lobby, Not inside, not outside, but right at the threshold, in the doorway. He was wearing all black, a dark knit sweater and black pants. He was not doing anything, not looking at his phone, not waiting for someone, not appearing to be on his way in or on his way out. He was just standing there, in a way that had no obvious explanation. I am the kind of person who scans rooms. I always have been. My family finds it slightly exhausting, honestly, but I have never been able to turn it off. I walk into a space, and my brain immediately starts logging things. Who is where? Who is looking at what? What does not fit? This man did not fit. He had absolutely heard the room number. The lobby was not large. My sister had not been whispering, and he was positioned in a way that made it impossible for him not to have heard. We had to walk past him to get out of the building. When I did, he looked at me. I want to be precise about this, because I think the precision matters. He did not leer. He did not smile in a way that was obviously threatening. He just looked at me with an expression that had nothing readable in it at all. No curiosity, no recognition, no social acknowledgement of the kind that happens when two strangers accidentally make eye contact. Just a flat, measuring look that lasted 1 second longer than it should have. I walked to the car without saying anything. I did not want to alarm my sisters or my grandma, but I kept thinking about it the whole time we were at the pizza place. We came back around 10:30. Everyone was tired from a full day of driving, and we were ready to be done. We walked through the front entrance, and I scanned the lobby automatically. He was there again. This time he was not standing near the entrance. He had moved to the far back corner of the lobby, where there was a small seating area with a couple of chairs and a television mounted on the wall. That corner had no lights on. The rest of the lobby was lit, but that section was dark. He was sitting in the dark, doing nothing. I do not know how to explain what it feels like to see something like that and not be able to say exactly why it is wrong. He was sitting in a chair. That is a completely normal thing, but there was something about the stillness of it, the deliberateness, the fact that he was in the one dark corner of the room that made my skin feel tight. My grandma called again while we were crossing the lobby. My sister answered, said the room number again, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. As we turned toward the stairs, I glanced back. The man had his phone out now and was whispering into it, watching us walk away. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself he was just a strange person who liked sitting alone in dark corners of motel lobbies at night, and that this was his business and not mine, and that I was letting my anxiety turn something harmless into something it was not. I kept telling myself that, right up until the knock on the door.
Our rooms were on the second floor. We had 2 rooms, with one room in between them that was not ours. Me and 2 of my sisters in one room, my stepmom, my grandma, and my other sister in the second room, down the hall. We got settled, got into bed, got on our phones. Standard wind-down routine. About 20 minutes later, someone knocked on our door. My whole body went cold before I was even standing up. I think I had been waiting for something since the lobby. I had not admitted that to myself, but some part of me had been waiting. I went to the door. It was my stepmom. The second I opened it, she pushed inside with an energy I had never seen from her before. Controlled, but barely. Her face was doing that specific thing faces do when someone is trying not to let fear show through. She told us to pack our things. Now. No questions, no discussion. Just pack. We packed. While we moved around the room grabbing things, she explained what had happened. She had cracked her door open to put a piece of trash out in the hallway, and standing directly beside her door frame, pressed flat against the wall, was a man. Not passing by, not at his own door, standing beside her door, against the wall, in a position that would have made him invisible from the peephole. When the door opened, he did not flinch. He looked at her, and then he walked calmly into the room that separated our 2. The room between us. He walked into the room between us. We left. We went downstairs. My stepmom went to the front desk and explained what happened, and to the clerk's credit, they gave us a full refund without much argument. I think the look on my stepmom's face communicated the situation clearly enough. We gathered everything and walked outside.
The parking lot was the next problem. There was a man moving along the row of cars parked in front of the building. At first glance, you might have thought he was walking to his vehicle, but he was not doing that. He was moving slowly and deliberately from car to car. At each one, he would stop, cup his hands against the glass, and look inside. Then he would try the door handle. Then he would move to the next one. He was not being subtle about it. He was not hiding what he was doing. I stopped walking and just stood there watching him, because I could not immediately process what I was seeing. My brain kept trying to find a reasonable explanation and could not. We were not quiet. 6 people leaving a motel at 11 at night with luggage are not quiet. He heard us. He looked up. He looked at us for a moment, then he turned toward the motel entrance and moved his head in a slow sideways gesture, a signal, the kind that means, come out here. The door opened. The man from the lobby walked out. The 2 of them stood near the entrance talking quietly, both of them looking over at our car periodically. We were trying to get in, trying to get my stepmom off the phone with my dad long enough to start the car, and everyone in the car was saying, "Go, go, go," in the kind of whispered panic that you do not want to be heard, but you also desperately need someone to move immediately. Then a 3rd man came out of the building. 3 men, all of them now walking slowly toward our car. My stepmom started the car. We pulled out of the parking lot faster than we probably should have, and did not slow down until the motel sign had disappeared from the mirrors entirely. We drove for another 2.5 hours before anyone felt calm enough to stop. The next motel we found had roaches in the bathroom. I have never been more relieved about anything in my life than I was about those roaches, because roaches meant the only thing wrong with that motel was the roaches. I have thought about that parking lot a lot over the past few years, about what those 3 men were doing, about whether they had a plan, or whether they were opportunistic, or whether we misread the whole thing. I do not think we misread it. My stepmom, who is not someone who panics, was pale when she got in the car. My grandma did not say a word for the first hour of driving. We got lucky that night. I am certain of that. My girlfriend and I were doing a road trip down to Florida. We live far enough north that it is a full 17-hour drive, which is the kind of trip that requires either 2 drivers or at least one of you being very comfortable with long stretches alone behind the wheel. I am that person. I have always liked driving long distances. I find something meditative about it, especially at night when the highway empties out and you feel like the only person moving in the whole state. Julie had been on board with the trip, but less enthusiastic about the driving part. She had tried to stay awake and keep me company through the first several hours, which I appreciated, but by hour 8, she was gone. Not just asleep, completely unconscious in the passenger seat, which is a talent I genuinely envy. She had already found a motel on the map a little earlier and booked us a room before she fell asleep, which was thoughtful. Around the 11-hour mark, when even I was starting to feel the edges of real exhaustion, I took the exit she had saved and found the place without any trouble. The parking lot was nearly empty. One other vehicle, maybe an employee's car. The sign was lit, the office was open, and a woman at the front desk gave me a key card and the room number with the slightly dazed friendliness of someone who had been pulled out of a nap but was still trying her best. Room 5, ground floor, far corner of the building. Julie woke up just enough to walk inside and brush her teeth before she was horizontal again and unconscious within minutes. I took a little longer, washed my face, found my phone charger, checked the lock on the door. The usual ritual. Then I realized the charger I had was Julie's. Mine was still in the car. I told the general direction of her sleeping form that I was running out to get it and would be right back. She made a noise that I interpreted as acknowledgement. I pulled the door almost shut behind me, leaving it cracked open out of pure habit so I would not lock myself out, and walked across the parking lot to the car.
The parking lot at 1:30 in the morning was completely quiet. The office lights had gone off. The woman at the desk had gone back to sleep, and the whole property had that specific suspended quality of a place where everyone has stopped being awake. No traffic on the road outside, no sound at all, except my footsteps on the asphalt. I found my charger in the center console where Julie had put it after unplugging it to use the car's Bluetooth connection, which is a thing she does and which I have long since accepted. I grabbed it, closed the car door, and turned around. There was a man standing next to the door of our room. Not nearby, not passing by, standing directly next to the doorframe, in a way that looked from where I was standing like he was about to push the door open. My door, the door I had left cracked open, with Julie asleep on the other side of it. I do not think I have ever crossed a parking lot that fast in my life. I was moving before I had consciously decided to move. I jogged toward him, making enough noise that he heard me coming and turned around before I got there. He was large, not just tall, but big through the shoulders and chest in a way that registered immediately. He was wearing a long coat that was wrong for the weather. The night was mild. There was no reason for a coat like that. When he turned and saw me coming, he smiled. The smile was the most unsettling thing about him, not because it was aggressive or threatening, because it was soft, almost gentle, and his voice when he spoke matched it exactly, low and quiet with a kind of careful pleasantness that felt entirely disconnected from the situation he was standing in. He asked how I was doing tonight. 1:30 in the morning, empty parking lot, long coat, my cracked open door directly behind him. I did not answer the question. I asked him what he was doing out this late and whether he was staying at the motel. He said yes, upstairs, just going for a walk. I smiled back in the particular controlled way you smile when you are trying not to show what you are actually thinking, and I said, "Enjoy your walk. Have a good night," and I stepped past him to the door and went inside and turned both locks in one continuous motion.
Julie did not stir. She was deep in whatever sleep had taken her over, breathing slowly, completely at peace. I stood at the door with my ear against it. I waited to hear footsteps, someone walking way along the path outside, the sound of a door opening and closing on another part of the property. Nothing. I stood there for probably 2 full minutes, hearing absolutely nothing. Either he had walked away so quietly that I could not detect it, or he had not walked away at all. I got down on my hands and knees on the floor of the motel room. I want to acknowledge how that sentence reads, but it felt in that moment like the correct thing to do. I crawled across the carpet to the window and reached up and moved the curtain the absolute smallest amount I could manage, while still being able to see through the gap, with one eye pressed close to the glass. He was standing directly in front of the door, not moving, not looking around the parking lot, facing the door, staring at it. I lay on that floor and watched him for what my phone later told me was 11 minutes. In 11 minutes, he did not shift his weight. He did not check his phone. He did not look toward any other part of the property. He stood in front of that door and stared at it with the patience of someone who was prepared to wait indefinitely. And then, slowly, he turned and walked away,
not toward the stairs that would have taken him to the upper floor where he had claimed his room was. Away from the building. Toward the back of the property, where the lot emptied into darkness. I stayed on the floor for another few minutes after he was gone. Then I got up, sat on the bed with my back against the headboard, and stayed awake until sunrise. Julie woke up rested and cheerful, and completely baffled by the fact that I looked like I had not slept at all. I told her over breakfast. She listened. She said it sounded creepy, but maybe he was just a weird guy who liked the night air. She was not wrong that he might have been just a weird guy who liked the night air. But she was not the one who watched him stand in front of that door for 11 minutes without moving. She was not the one who saw his face in the parking lot when he turned around. I have never left a motel door cracked open since that night. Not even for 30 seconds. Not for any reason.
This last story is different from the others. The others have a human explanation. Strange behavior, threatening intent, the kind of danger that comes from other people making bad decisions or having something wrong with them. This one I have told a small number of people, and every time I tell it, someone offers me a reasonable explanation for what happened. And every time I accept that explanation on the surface, while knowing privately that it does not actually account for everything. I was on a long drive, crossing through Tennessee late at night. Rain had been coming down for the last 2 hours, the kind of steady, hard rain that is not dramatic, but makes the road feel genuinely unsafe if you are tired. I was tired. The combination decided it for me. I was going to stop. I found a motel on the edge of a small town, on a secondary highway. It was a quiet-looking property, older, well-maintained in the way that suggests someone cares about it without having the money to update it. The kind of place that feels like it has been there for 40 years and will be there for 40 more. The woman at the front desk was welcoming in the way of someone who is genuinely glad to see another human being at midnight. She told me I was lucky to find them, said they were almost fully empty that night, only one other guest staying on the ground floor. She gave me a key card for room 14 on the second floor, end of the hall, and told me to let her know if I needed anything. I thanked her and took the stairs up.
The hallway on the second floor was quiet and dim, and smelled the way hallways in old motels smell, a mixture of whatever cleaning product they use and the accumulated years of the building. My room was the last one on the right. I slid the key card in. The light went green. I pushed the door open. The television was on. Not just the television. The room was occupied. There was a bag on the luggage rack, unzipped, with clothes visible inside it. There was a water bottle on the nightstand, half drunk, with the cap sitting beside it. The bathroom light was on, casting a strip of yellow across the floor near the far wall. I took one step inside and stopped. My keycard had worked. The room number on the door matched the number she had given me. I checked both of those things twice, standing in the doorway. I went back downstairs. The woman looked confused in a way that seemed genuine. She apologized, said there must have been a system error, and moved me to room 8 on the ground floor. New keycard, different wing of the building. She seemed a little flustered, but not alarmed, the way someone looks when something minor has gone technically wrong and they are embarrassed about it. I went to room 8 and got settled. It was identical to what I had expected from room 14. Standard layout, clean, older furnishings. I put my bag down, sat on the edge of the bed, and felt the particular relief of finally being horizontal.
I had been in the room for about 15 minutes, maybe a few minutes more. I had not quite fallen asleep,
still in that stage where your thoughts are becoming loosely connected and the ceiling starts to feel farther away. I heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Motel hallways transmit sound differently depending on the construction. In this one, footsteps on the floor were audible but muffled, the way sound is when it passes through carpet and an interior wall. I could hear them as a kind of rhythmic pressure rather than a sharp click. The footsteps slowed as they passed my door. And then they stopped, right there, at my door. I opened my eyes and looked at the ceiling. A pause of several seconds. Then 3 knocks, slow and evenly spaced. Not urgent, not casual, deliberate. I got up and went to the peephole. The hallway was empty. I stood there looking through the peephole for long enough to feel certain there was no one right up against the door out of my sight line. The hallway was empty in both directions as far as I could see. I cracked the door. Nothing. No sound of footsteps retreating. No one at the end of the hall. The hallway was completely still. I shut the door and turned both locks. Then I added the security latch. I lay back down. I told myself it had been a door somewhere else in the building, sound carrying strangely, something that had nothing to do with my room. I told myself I was overtired and my perception was not reliable. I talked myself back toward the edge of sleep. 20 minutes later, the footsteps came back. Same pace, same direction. They slowed in the same place. They stopped in my door. This time I did not go to the peephole. I lay in the bed with the lights on and stared at the door and waited. No knock this time. Just the footsteps. And then, after a long moment, they started again, continuing down the hall until I could not hear them anymore. I did not sleep that night. I sat upright in that bed with the overhead light burning until the darkness outside the window turned gray and then pale and then the full white of a Tennessee morning. When I went to check out, the same woman was at the desk. She had the warm, slightly tired face of someone at the end of a long night shift. I thanked her and told her the room had been fine. And then, because I could not help it, I mentioned the footsteps. Not in a dramatic way. I said something like, "I heard some noise in the hallway last night, someone moving around, and I just wanted to mention it in case there had been other guests who had reported anything." She paused. It was a short pause, the kind that most people would probably not notice, but I noticed it. She said the other guest, the one she had mentioned when I checked in, had actually checked out earlier in the evening, before I had even arrived. I asked her to repeat that. She said it again. The one other guest had checked out hours before I got there. She said it calmly and pleasantly, and while looking at a point somewhere slightly past my shoulder. I said thank you and walked to my car. I have thought about that conversation many times since, about what she knew, about what her pause meant, about whether the room I had first been assigned to was actually empty, or whether something else entirely was going on in that building on that particular night. I have decided, deliberately and carefully, that I would rather not know. Some answers do not improve your life. Some doors, once you know what is behind them, cannot be closed again. And so I choose not to know. But I do not stay in motels anymore. Not if I can help it.
4 roads, 4 motels, 4 people who stopped because they were tired and needed somewhere to sleep. Most of the time, that is all a motel is. A temporary place, a forgettable night. You check out in the morning, and by the time you reach your destination, you have already half forgotten the room number. But here's the thing about these stories that I keep coming back to. Not one of these people did anything wrong. They were careful. They locked their doors. They called the front desk when something was off. They trusted their instincts when everything in the situation was telling them something was wrong. They laughed when they needed to leave. And they still had experiences that they have not been able to shake months or years later. That is the part that stays with me. Not the people who did something reckless and paid a price for it, but the people who did everything right and still ended up in a situation that changed how they move through the world. It makes you reconsider what safety actually means, whether the precautions we take are as reliable as we tell ourselves they are, whether the feeling of being protected is always the same thing as actually being protected. Travel safe, trust your gut, and maybe do not leave the door cracked when you go back to your car. If one of these stories got under your skin, I would genuinely love to know which one. Drop it in the comments below. And if something has happened to you, on a road trip, at a motel, at a rest stop, somewhere that has stayed with you, share it. This community reads those stories, I read those stories, and some of them end up being the subject of the next video. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight. I will see you in the next one. Subscribe, like, comment, share.